Hi everybody. This is kind of a follow-up video that I wanted to make in response to Digi's audio mixing and analysis videos vlog that he did a little bit earlier. I just wanted to follow up with that with some extra tips for anyone who was kind of left hanging from that video, because it really mostly had one major point of making sure to use compression on your vocals, or narration, if you want to call it that way. I usually do music, not analysis videos. So as of right now, I've recorded a couple of demo tracks over here, and just talking about the different ways to record things, and how like the benefits and the negatives for recording certain things certain ways, right? So this is probably going to be the most common one that you'll hear.
Anime is a Japanese colloquialism that comes from the shortening of the word animation.
So what you get from that is the normal narration voice, very common, sitting at your desk, having your microphone set up like I do right here. This is going to be a lot deeper than most people would ever have their microphone set up in real life ever. But it's good in videos because you have a lot of the extra bass tone that comes from the being really close to your microphone and not having much of the room's natural echo from the environment. And so a lot of people would go with this, but the thing is that when you're really close, you sometimes have to turn up your gain if you don't have that much of a high power microphone, and you'd get a lot of the background noise if you wanted to speak at a really calm and normal pace, as opposed to screaming your script across the room. So as of right now, maybe if you can hear in the background of that tape that I just recorded, that you maybe heard my computer or just a static from my interface, just because I had to turn it up so much to get the desired level that I wanted. All right, and so now we cover the first really subset of how to record. This is another one I recorded, but the difference between this one and the other one is that I recorded this standing up. I recorded this at a much lower gain on my interface that I had before, and I projected my voice on this one. Like, I'm not that great of a speaker, so I'm like not probably the best guy to get advice from when it comes to enunciation or anything like that. So just take a listen, you'll see.
Anime is a Japanese colloquialism that comes from the shortening of the word animation.
And so the major difference between this one and the first one that you heard is that there's almost no background noise on this one. The thing that we want from not having background noise is what we're going to end up doing when it comes to compression later. So just keep that in mind with not having any sort of room noise when you're recording narration. All right, and so back to where we were discussing earlier, where you have the combination of the room and your natural voice. I wanted to kind of submit like a metaphor with that whole idea. Just listen to this quick demo that I recorded.
This is how I sound like when I stand really close to the microphone. This is how I sound like when I stand really far from the microphone.
And look, like, you might have heard the difference where the second one, obviously besides the fact that it's quieter, that you hear that there's walls around me. You hear them in a room, and it sounds, if anything, kind of more natural than having the narration voice. So I figure a big issue that a lot of people have in their skits, that people like to record a lot in these comedy videos, is that the skit sounds like it's recorded all super close. Like, I know like some people just don't do the whole boom mic thing, which is pretty important. If you don't have a boom mic, almost everything recorded from your condenser microphone is going to sound kind of emphasized on your vocals. So every low is going to sound boosted. Some of the treble is going to be boosted to supplement the natural voice.
You totally don't know how to speak with controlled breathing if you pause in between sentences to take breath. You totally don't know how to speak with controlled breathing if you pause in between sentences.
Okay, and so we're back with kind of like, that was kind of a short break. So I wanted to show you guys kind of like some demo vocals that I was doing for a song. I'm sorry I don't have anything that's like directly related to anime analysis. This is something like I was recording a long time ago. It's a cover of Bonfire by Childish Gambino a while ago, just to test rapping and all that. But for the most part, I'm going to be kind of covering like compression and quick ways to remove things like breaths and other background noises like that. I guess background noise is the most prominent one. So if you can be so lucky enough to avoid noise at all and have to have some, there's the most obvious step of using the remove noise tool in Audacity or in FL Studio. This feature is actually built into Edison. As you can tell, I'm recording over here. I'll probably do that afterwards because I know my computer's in the background. I have people in the other room. But for the most part, I don't want to cover that. I actually do have some sort of mixing deck, kind of like, well, a mixer channel that has all the settings that I was going to use for this one.
Hot like a parked car. I sound weird like nigga with a hard R. Fly like the logo on my cousin's 440. Eating Oreos like these white girls that blow me. Vodka for my ladies. Whiskey for a grown man. Hanging in the islands looking for Earl like Toe Jam.
Okay, so a lot of the issues that you hear here aren't really something that a lot of people can catch on the first time making their first analysis or any sort of music, actually. So usually when I talk, I actually have a pretty consistent tone of voice, usually in the same volume, not really stressful when it comes to compression. There was one thing that was kind of inaccurate when Digi was talking about compression earlier, is that it is true that it brings the highs lower, but it doesn't bring the lows higher. That's actually a different type of compression called parallel compression that we're not going to cover. But for the most part, that's kind of an important thing because you're not really, because you'll hear it and then you'll think that the lowers were the lower sections of the song or vocal track were erased because in comparison there's a smaller gap. But that's not the case. And so this track, right? Whenever I start my verses, there's always like a quick spike at the beginning of each beat because I'm always emphasizing my beats to make sure I'm doing everything in time and it's not really a huge issue later. So when you
hot like a parked car.
So you hear hot like a parked car. So like hot and park are extremely loud in comparison. So what we're gonna do is to bring it down. We're gonna slap a compressor on it. Actually, you know what? We're not gonna do that first. More importantly, we want to get rid of the background noise. To do that, we can use the actually Fruity limiter or any sort of limiter plugin or gate plugin that you have available to you. It's actually just like this because I have the effects off on this channel. So here it is. Here's what it looks like. I'm going to disable the other ones just so you guys don't hear it as it comes out. So we're running it through it now. We're going to hear how it changes it because I have my settings so it's like completely cuts down anything under this gold bar that's moving right here. Okay? And so anything that's under there is going to be completely cut off. And then whenever it drops below that, the level is going to slowly go down as defined by the release knob over here. So we're going to take a listen to this again, and you'll see white lines kind of indicating how the levels are changing while it's playing. So go ahead.
Hot like a parked car. I sound weird like nigga with a hard R. Fly like the logo on my cousin's 440. Eating Oreos like these white girls that blow me. Vodka for my ladies. Whiskey for a grown man. Hanging in.
Okay, and so what you hear from that is that like you see all these little dippets right here that they're all dropping off. This is the areas where I usually take breaths in between my speaking, and it might sound a little bit unnatural for narration recording if you have it really high and have it so it really starts cutting off really quickly. So that's why I always recommend cranking up the release knob on that, so it's not cutting off sharp drops like maybe here, like these areas right here. Like they don't drop that far down, so it's almost in completely unnoticeable.
Hot like a parked car.
Okay, and we're back. So this section right here is where I actually first start the song. This is where I'm breathing like a cancer patient, pretty much getting ready to like hype myself up and getting ready to spit the verse. So the way I'm just removing that, honestly, you could just cut it off at the beginning of the verse. It's not that big of a deal, but as just a quick way to fix it and a quick way to like have to not deal with all those extra breaths, all those people talking in the background, and none of that, and you just want the raw vocal. Use the gate plugin. It's a lot easier, a lot less stress. And I think this is actually something for free also included in Audacity. So make sure to take a look at that, okay? Next thing we're going to look at is the compressor. So this is what Digibro was mostly talking about when he said maybe put Sound Goodizer or Fruity Compressor or whatever that is available to you, any sort of software. This is a very versatile and very dangerous plugin. This could easily destroy your audio signal. It could also fix a lot of really awful audio signals. So the thing with using a compressor is that you want everything to be consistent. You want all your volumes to be consistent enough that you don't have sections of your vocal track that end up being lower or higher than the music that you have playing in the background. So if you're going to mix this with music, which is why Digibro actually discussed this in his video, you want to just stay at one level so you don't have to keep changing it or have any sort of clip that kind of like has like lines to make sure it goes with the song or anything like that. It makes it a lot easier. So I'm going to explain what all these knobs do individually relatively quickly, because this is actually a pretty complicated process. It's not something you have to be a master at to have anything that sounds good. So the most important knob you're going to have is your threshold, right? Threshold is where so you have sections of your audio that are going to be above a certain audio level. So here I have it so anything above negative 21 is going to be affected by the compressor. What this means, I only want the tips of the audio track to come down. So I want to set it low enough so that it affects those tips, but not everything else. So as I said, I was pretty consistent. So most of my tracks only have those small peaks that I want to bring down. So I didn't bring it down that much. 21 is fine. Negative 21 is fine. I can go negative 30, but that's overkill for the most part. If you're recording right, at least you can. It's obviously going to change depending how you record your audio at the first place. Ratio is just going to be the magnification of how you do it. Generally, 1 to 2 is pretty much good enough for any sort of heavy compression, and 1 to like negative whatever, just a 0. 1 to 0 is going to be good for like compression. What a lot of people don't adjust at all is going to be the attack and release. So this is important because a lot of people, like Digibro said, he gets fatigued when he's listening to a lot of hyper compressed audio. That's because like most people don't ever really listen to a signal that is just consistent like that forever. And so when you listen to this, it sounds kind of droning. It sounds droning because you're not like, there's no parts that are left as an exception to the compression. It's going to be all consistent all the way through. But if you're human, you know that not everyone is perfectly flat every time. They're not all at the same volume all the time, even if you're speaking to them wherever and you think they're consistent. So the way to combat this is to leave some of the peaks in audio just changes there. So the attack is essentially when the compression is actually going to happen. So when I say hot like a parked car, right? I don't want it to affect the entirety of hot immediately. I want it to maybe do it for half of it. Instead of having it be flat and then drop off, I want it to be like half of that size and then maybe curve down slowly. So I'm going to set the attack to slightly higher, maybe like 5 milliseconds, not too much. And your release, this is what people are going to hear after the fact, after it exits the threshold that you set earlier. Generally, if you only want it to be flat, you only really want it to affect those peaks, you can keep it a really low release. You don't really need it to be that fast. What I like to do is just to smooth it out and keep it slightly more natural so people don't really know that there's compression there. I turn it up slightly just so it's not really a question of whether it's there or not. They just assume it's not. Let's listen to what we have now.
Hot like a parked car. I sound weird like nigga with a hard R. Fly like the logo on my cousin's 440. Eating Oreos like these white girls that blow.
Okay, and so now you're hearing those background noises that I was talking to you about. Earlier, when I had the compressor off completely, you didn't hear any of my reverb from my room. Now you're hearing that there's a really small reverb there that's kind of like being brought out by the compressor, and a lot of people can be annoyed by that. Generally, if you record right the first time, that's not going to be an issue. Or I can go over the treated room and all that in a separate video, because as you can tell, I have acoustic panels back there and I have acoustic panels all over the room. And it helps it a lot, but I don't want it to be completely dead because I have this is a multi-purpose room. It's not just for recording vocals, but generally deader for vocals, the better. Really to your preference. Really to your preference.
Hot like a parked car. I sound weird like nigga with a hard R. Fly like the logo on my cousin's 440. Eating Oreos like these white.
Okay, cool. And so now that we have our most important limiter, the gate to remove the noise, the compression, this is where most people can stop completely and just have it be done with. But I actually do a little bit extra in terms of editing the vocals with a little bit of an EQ. So a lot of people, since they are recording really close quarters, they get to have that narration voice. And a lot of those times, not everyone really has a super deep, soothing voice that they can put over a analysis video that they made. So I have an EQ here to help kind of supplement the bass that I don't have. Okay, so I did have a small mistake earlier. I managed to put the EQ before after the compressor, which is not a good idea. You always want to have the compressor first. The EQ first, then your compressor, so it doesn't compress all the signals that you don't need. So this is what essentially I do. I cut off the low end because half the time you don't really need the low end to be audible at all. Since you're going to be putting this over music, most of the time the low end's just going to come from that, and you want people to just understand what you're saying, so it's not really a huge deal. But then the meat of your voice, it actually doesn't come from the super low end. It comes from the maybe low mid-range, which is generally the fundamental note, which is like the lowest note that most people can achieve while normally speaking. The fundamental note is usually somewhere in this range for at least males. Females is slightly higher, maybe here. It's not that much of a big deal. Generally, cut off the low end. If you don't have that great of a microphone, you can boost the high end over here. Really simple stuff. It's not, once you hear it, you've probably done this a lot to your music on your phone, if you've ever had an EQ program in your phone ever. Listen to this again just so you guys can hear what the changes are and kind of see it through the plugin as well.
Hot like a parked car. I sound weird like nigga with a hard R. Fly like the logo on my cousin's 440. Eating Oreos like these white girls that blow me. Vodka for my ladies.
And my microphone's already kind of treble heavy, so I don't really increase it at all in that sense. All right, and so now that we discussed actually processing the vocal, we can now put it over some music, right?
Go on my cousin's 440, eating Oreo.
Definitely not bad. Could have been a lot better. So right now it's not sitting exactly in the mix. It sounds perfect in terms of volume. I actually did have a version already prepared for you guys to just listen to. So that version's just really intense as opposed to the original dry one, right? Alright, this is a completely dry version that I was using before we did any modifications to take out the breath, do any compression or anything like that. So, go ahead.
Hot like a parked car, I sound weird like nigga with a hard R. Fly like the logo on my cousin's 440, eating Oreos like these white girls that blow me. Vodka for my ladies, whiskey for a grown man.
And that sounds great and all, but listen to this. This is much better, much better.
Hot like a parked car, I sound weird like nigga with a hard R. Fly like the logo on my cousin's 440, eating Oreos like these white girls that blow me. Vodka for my ladies, whiskey for a grown man. Hanging in the islands looking for Earl like Toad.
Okay, and so hopefully you guys learned something from this video, and alright y'all, have a good one.